Hello. Now it's time for us to start covering the Norwegian defense. And as you might know already, the Norwegian defense appears after e4, g6, d4, and here knight f6. A very kind of controversial looking move, and generally a move that you would consider to be a sort of a mix between the Alekhine and the Perk. In my opinion, this line is definitely very provocative and it's for sure quite risky. Yet it's, I think, heavily underestimated, and especially with the appearance of Alc0, people have found out that many lines are actually very playable, and while I'm not, going to try to prove that this is the very best defense, I'll definitely show you a bunch of very interesting new ideas here. So, for sure, the only two logical moves that make really sense here are either e5, which is the most direct attempt at refuting what black does, or the move knight c3, which just says, alright, are you gonna play d6 and we'll just play the perk where you've just allowed for e5? Or what is it gonna look like? And this is exactly the move we'll start our coverage with. So knight to c3. And here we immediately hit white hard with d5. In this position, white can play the move pawn to e5, and that is, by all means, the most critical move, which we are going to study later in the next clips. But for now, let us focus on the on other possibilities. So here white can either take the pawn on d5 with the move e takes on d5, or white can maybe protect the pawn with bishop d3, or if he is feeling adventurous and funky, it's even possible to play f3. And those are all moves that we will start our discussion with. So let's start with something like f3. And actually I think this move is not as harmless or as silly as it might appear, and black needs to know a thing or two here in order not to get an uncomfortable position. So first of all, very importantly, what we don't really want to do is go bishop to g7. Now white will just go e5, and if we play knight h5 after g4, unfortunately the knight ends up trapped. It cannot escape on g7 anymore, black is just lost. And if we make a move like knight d7, well, the pawn's gonna hang, and obviously knight g8 is not attractive, so either way, the position is already very, very depressing. So it's very important we do something else. And the something else will be taking on e4 right away. Now, white will take back, and here we'll just develop. We will see the structures after e5 a little later, but generally if white goes e5, well, now that we have the d5 square available, I don't really believe we can have anything to worry about. For example, if white simply develops here with, let's say, knight f3, we're simply gonna castle, even though it's actually, by the way, also very possible and very logical to continue with c5. And this is a move that I would strongly suggest we investigate as well, but we will just continue with castling. And if, say, bishop c4, you have multiple ways here how you can play. For example, one idea I really like is bishop e6. Now it might look a little weird, but the d5 squares has been weakened by the fact that white has pushed the e-pawn, and so I would like to install my piece there if possible. And please note, it's not a complete outpost yet, because white can still play the move pawn to c4 and challenge that knight on d5. However, still, this is something white has to worry about. And now black is threatening to take on c3 and wins his bishop. So if white just castles, okay, after knight c3, next we just take and the game's over. And if white just protects this knight with some silly moves, then there's gonna follow knight b4. And next up, black either wins the bishop or wins the pawn on c2 and then the rook, and the game is over as well. So white here has to play the move knight d5. And after bishop d5, he would likely take, and now black, in my opinion, gets a very comfortable position because he is about to undermine the center with the move c5, and the position is just good, period. For example, if white castles, then we can just continue with c5. Immediately black's undermining the position. If, say, c3, we can always trade, and then the square on d5 would be an outpost later, just knight c6, rook f to d8, rook a to c8, and so on and so forth. White has a somewhat better move queen e2, but we're already digging a little too deeply. So basically white wants to play the move c4. But here, both the idea of playing f6, undermining the center, and the idea of even playing some slightly funky looking move f5 looks very interesting to me. Well, I would rather start with f6. And for example, if white is to play c4, then queen e6. And the position here tends to be rather balanced, I would say. For example, if ef6, queen e2, king e2, and then just ef6, I don't see any reason why it would be worse here. But it's also very possible for black to continue with a simple knight b6, and when the white bishop retreats, and of course it wants to retreat to b3, that was the only point of developing it to c4, to this diagonal, to put pressure on f7, maybe stop ideas with f6, maybe put pressure on this pawn with knight to g5, and then with rook to f1, then we will play c5. And after dc5 here, we can simply trade queens, and after knight d1, just knight to d7. And this pawn is inevitably getting lost, or this one, which is even more kind of painful for white. And for example, after say e6, which I think is the best move, we can now do a lot of things. For example, the easiest I think is just to take on c5 and just give up a pawn temporarily, but hit this bishop hard. And later we just want to take, and then get this pawn. And if white plays bishop c4, you can even play bishop e6. And after bishop e6, knight e6, this pawn is inevitably getting lost, and albeit black would have a slightly worse pawn structure, the fact that his bishop is so active, and the fact that the knight's coming to c6, the rook's coming to d8, black's about to play b5, a5, grab space on the queen side, and so on and so forth, I believe ensure him of very decent position. Now, let us carry on. So it's very possible to play like this, it's possible to play in many other ways as well, but yeah, black should be doing good anyway. It's possible to just play c5 here as well, which is also very, very interesting. I expect the calm, quiet, adequate white player to simply play knight f3 and here bishop c4. And in fact, according to my research, this is exactly how most games have continued thus far. And now, you might laugh at what I'm about to say, but I would like to introduce an important theoretical novelty. And the reason why it sounds a little funny, even though this sounds like a very, normal thing to say when we're doing theoretical research, is because the line I'm showing, its very character is very non-theoretical. It looks like we're playing it to avoid theory, but in reality, I'm trying to make it a dangerous theoretical weapon in a way. And here, most black players have been either afraid of white pushing e5, and so they wanted to control the d5 square, or they wanted to prepare the move b5. Either way, they have continued with c6. However, I personally do not have very much trust in this move, because unfortunately then white can simply continue with e5. Now, if say knight d5, white can do many things, but even if he simply takes, then the bishop on g7 may not always feel all that well. And it appears to me like white is getting exactly what he is looking to, get, and I'd rather avoid this. Even though it is by no means bad, by no standard it is bad, however, I would strongly suggest we avoid this. Because, especially, we have a very powerful novelty, which is pawn to c5. Now, we are about to destroy the white center completely, aren't we? And here, of course, the most logical thing for white to do is to play d5. Well, if white is to take this pawn, we have multiple continuations, but the easiest one is to just take. And now if white takes the pawn on d1, the queen on d1 with the knight, he is just losing the central pawn, and then the one on c5 as well, and he is just gonna be doing terrible. And if the king takes instead, we've got plenty of opportunities, the easiest one arguably being just knight to d7, and then the pawn on c5 is gonna get lost. Or it's also possible to play knight a6, or it's possible to play knight g4 to first threaten f2 and then go knight d7. One interesting idea about this move is that immediate knight d7 might run into some e5, e6, even though that is fine as well at the end of the day, but knight g4 looks very good as well, and here just knight d7 for example, and I could not find any problems for black in this situation.